All right, so Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, just got a $2 billion payout from the Saudi government in effectively what amounts to be a bribe for somebody who could potentially be back in the White House in 2024 as a high-up advisor to Donald Trump, specifically on issues of foreign policy. So the details of this are somehow simultaneously hilarious and also just an example of some of the worst rank corruption that exists in the United States and that we somehow allow to legally happen. But here from a Rolling Stone, they say, gee, wonder why Mohammed bin Salman personally intervened to give Jared Kushner $2 billion. And they say advisors for the Saudi Arabian Foreign Wealth Fund didn't want to infuse Kushner's private equity firm with cash, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman did it anyways. So, I mean, obviously the thing that they are appealing to here is that Jared Kushner was one of the biggest proponents in defending Mohammed bin Salman specifically, but also just Saudi Arabia more generally from the accusations or the affirmations basically that Mohammed bin Salman was directly implicated in the murder of Washington Post journalist and American resident Jamal Khashoggi. So he was really one of the main figures in trying to cover that up and make sure that Mohammed bin Salman didn't face any consequences for that. So, you know, it's not any mystery here why this money is being infused here and why somebody like MBS would personally step in to make this happen. But the details of this, again, are just absolutely fucking wild. So they say Jared Kushner landed a $2 billion from Saudi Arabia 6 months after his father-in-law Donald Trump left the White House, and the sum was sent to Kushner's private equity firm after Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman overruled advisors for his nation's sovereign wealth fund who thought Kushner and his firm were too sketchy to warrant such a large investment, the New York Times reported on Sunday. I mean, listen, do you know how sketchy a motherfucker you gotta be for Saudi Arabia to conclude that you're too sketchy to do business with? I mean, you seriously have to be the sketchiest motherfucker on the planet, which is exactly what Jared Kushner actually is. And again, this isn't like any opaque, we're doing this as an investment and it has nothing to do with the political outcomes of what Jared Kushner represented under the Trump administration or what he could represent if Trump takes back the White House. This is just, it's rank corruption at face value. And also on top of that, you see Mohammed bin Salman personally stepping in to make sure that this happened and overruling his own advisors from the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So if you guys aren't aware, the Sovereign Wealth Fund from Saudi Arabia is essentially just them expanding their investments beyond oil-related holdings and stuff like that. They have massive investments here in the United States and the rest of the West. So this is basically how they use their political influence around the world to essentially conduct bribes like this that we're seeing right here. But they continue with more details, saying the $620 billion fund's advisory panel was reportedly concerned that Kushner's newly created firm, Affinity Partners, didn't have much experience, that the firm's operations were unsatisfactory in all aspects, and that Kushner posed a public relations risk because of his work in the Trump administration. And the fund's advisors discussed these issues during a meeting last June 30th, days after which bin Salman overruled them and greenlit the payment. And they say the panel may have thought Kushner's association with Trump was cause for concern, but bin Salman clearly sees it as an advantage, especially considering that Kushner could be back in the White House if Trump runs and wins in 2024, which he's likely to do as of right now. But they say the two political scions, not sure how to pronounce that word exactly, have become friendly with bin Salman, undeterred by the Trump family's financial volatility and potential criminality, and Kushner undeterred by the Saudi government's gruesome murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. And the two chatted regularly before and after the murder, the Times reported in 2018, calling each other Jared and Mohammed in text messages. Very, cozied up there, these two guys are. But again, you see just the rank corruption that exists from somebody who was a high-up advisor in the Trump administration who was specifically working on Middle Eastern affairs. And I'll give you guys a reminder in terms of just some of the absolutely embarrassing failures of what Jared Kushner was doing in this position, right? Remember, he said he was going to bring peace to the Middle East, and Donald Trump said if anybody is going to be able to do it, it's going to be this guy Jared Kushner, as if he has any qualifications or experience in that realm in any way whatsoever. He doesn't, and so you get insane stuff like what we saw with Trump's peace plan for Palestine and Israel. And I'll give you a breakdown and read into that a little bit because again, it's just absolutely hilarious. But as Judd Legume is saying here, let's be very clear, Jared Kushner used his position in the White House to advance Saudi interests, including including making sure that Saudi Arabia wouldn't be held accountable for the brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and now he's cashing in to the tune of $2 billion. And it gets even better because the $2 billion that he's gotten is pretty much the bulk of all of the money that he has in this private equity firm. So a little bit more details here. The Times also revealed that Kushner was not the only official from the Trump's White House to receive Saudi money after the former president was voted out of office in 2020. Former Treasury Secretary, one of the worst ghouls in the entire planet, really, Steve Mnuchin's private equity firm, Liberty Strategic Capital, has received $1 billion from the same Saudi fund that invested in Kushner's outfit. And they say, quote, the Saudi fund agreed to invest twice as much and on more generous terms with Mr. Kushner than it did at about the same time with former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, even though Mr. Mnuchin had a record as a successful investor before entering government. So listen, with all of the millions and millions of criticisms you could come up with for Steve Mnuchin, this absolute Wall Street ghoul, one of those is not that he is not capable of generating money for his his shareholders or those that invest in his equity firms. He definitely has a track record of raising a fuck ton of money in dubious ways, to say the least. But they gave more money to Jared Kushner than to Steve Mnuchin. So again, you see, even though they're saying that Jared Kushner, his private equity firm, is sketchy as fuck and they're completely unqualified to be running something like this, and they're not trustworthy with the money or the investments that they're making, they gave him more money than Steve Mnuchin, a former Wall Street and current Wall Street ghoul. So, you see the dynamic here. Clearly, this isn't about an actual investment or monetary return on investment. It's just a political bribe. But they continue here saying, despite public outcry over the regime's continued human rights abuses, a spokesperson for the Kushner firm told the Times that it is proud to have the Saudis fund as an investor, and Affinity's latest public filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission show that the firm's primary fund has $2.5 billion under management, the bulk of which appears to be from Saudi Arabia. So how the fuck is any of this legal? Okay, you have somebody who is operating within the White House, okay, as an advisor specifically on Middle Eastern affairs, and this guy is able to leave office temporarily, assuming that Donald Trump is going to run again in 2024, which it seems like he is. He's able to leave office temporarily, go get literally billions of dollars in bribes from the Saudi government, and they know that if Donald Trump takes power, they're going to be rewarded with weapon sales or continued diplomatic protection in the form of no accountability for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. So it's just a political bribe, and it's really just in your face, at face value. You don't even have to think about it for 2 seconds. It's just rank corruption, and this is something that obviously exists on both sides. Hunter Biden, he also has profited off of Joe Biden's name in multiple different ways, but I think there's a key distinction there in that Hunter Biden, however sketchy of a motherfucker he actually is, and he definitely is, and he deserves criticism for that, but he's not in the White House right now. Okay, he's not a top advisor to Joe Biden. Joe Biden did not appoint his son Hunter Biden to go resolve peace in the Middle East as Donald Trump did with Jared Kushner. So there is definitely a pretty wide difference between these two different things, with one of them working directly on the U.S. foreign policy projects, essentially. But just to give you an example on one of the most embarrassing foreign policy solutions, basically, that Jared Kushner was coming up, this was his plan. Okay, just going to read a couple paragraphs here from the Wikipedia page just to get a very basic outline, but this was the plan that he came up with to solve peace between Israel and Palestine. The details of this are just laughably embarrassing, but here from Wikipedia, they say, the Trump peace plan, officially titled Peace to Prosperity, a vision to improve the lives of Palestinian and Israeli people, was a proposal by the Trump administration to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Donald Trump formally unveiled the plan in a White House press conference alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the 28th of January 2020, and the plan had been delayed by 2 years previously and previously rejected by the Palestinians, who were not invited to the meeting. They were not invited to the meeting. You're doing a peace plan between Israel and Palestine, and you didn't invite the Palestinians to the meeting. Okay. So they continue here saying, the plan was authored by a team led by Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, and both the West Bank settlers, Yesha Council, and the Palestinian leadership rejected the plan. The former because it envisioned a Palestinian state, and the latter arguing that it was too biased in favor of Israel. And the plan is divided into two parts, an economic portion and a political portion. And on the 22nd of June 2019, the Trump administration released the economic portion of the plan, titled Peace to Prosperity, and the political portion was released later in January of 2020. But it gets even better. They say the plan has been characterized as requiring too few concessions from the Israelis and imposing too harsh requirements on the Palestinians, I wonder why. And reactions among congressional Democrats were mixed, and all the leading 2020 Democratic presidential candidates denounced it as a smokescreen for annexation. So listen, if you can get all of the 2020 Democratic candidates to denounce this plan, even with the massive support that most of them had for Israel and their violent apartheid and continued ethnic cleansing, then you know that this plan was a piece of shit. But they denounced it as a smokescreen for annexation. And they continue saying proposed benefits to the Palestinians from the plan are contingent on Israel and the United States subsequently agreeing that a list of conditions have been implemented, including total demilitarization, abandonment of international legal action against Israel and the United States, and compliance with all other terms and conditions of the 180-page plan. And many of these conditions have been denounced by opponents as impossible and fantastic. And the plan proposed a series of Palestinian enclaves surrounded by an enlarged Israel, and rejected a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem proper, proposing instead a Palestinian capital on the outskirts of the city. And the proposed areas for the Palestinian capital have been described as grim neighborhoods and are separated from Jerusalem proper by the Israeli West Bank barrier. And they say many Israeli settlers have expressed discontent and concern with the plan's security assurances. So listen, I mean, he's a complete fucking joke. This is a guy who obviously has absolutely no fucking idea what he's doing running operations in the Middle East. But this is the guy who Donald Trump, in an extreme example of nepotism, put in charge of peace in the Middle East. And not only did he fail on that front, but he's engaging in rank corruption, in this case, taking $2 billion from the Saudi government in what is unambiguously a bribe that Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman is essentially coming forward and hedging his bets that Donald Trump is going to win in 2024, and that he's going to get some sort of a payout, again, whether that's continued military support, whether it's diplomatic protection or legal protection for MBS himself. It's just a pure example of some of the worst types of corruption that exist here in the United States, and it's just absolutely embarrassing that any functioning society at all would allow this type of shit to be legal.